The night was thick with rain, a steady drumbeat against the cracked windows of the forgotten motel on the edge of town. The neon sign outside flickered on and off, bathing the room in a sickly red glow. Inside sat Marcus, a man who had spent years living in the shadows. His face was carved with the hard lines of a life built on violence, his eyes as cold as steel, his heart long buried beneath the weight of blood he had spilled. He had always believed he was beyond redemption, a ghost with nothing left to lose. But tonight, on the stained sheets of his motel bed, lay a single photograph that threatened to shatter the armor he had built around his soul. It was the image of a woman, Eliza. She was not glamorous, not the kind of beauty that lit up billboards or magazines. Her beauty was softer, quieter, the kind that lived in the small details. The gentle curve of her smile, the way her eyes seemed to shine even in the stillness of a frozen photograph, the tender placement of her hand against the round swell of her belly. She was pregnant, perhaps 7 months along, her body glowing with the sacred promise of life. She looked so unaware of the dangers circling her, so peaceful in her vulnerability, that Marcus felt something strange and unwelcome stir inside him. His hand, the same hand that had ended countless lives, trembled ever so slightly as he picked up the photo. For years, Marcus had trained himself not to feel, not to think of his targets as people. They were names, faces, paychecks, nothing more. But this was different. The assignment was clear: eliminate Eliza before she brought her child into the world. No hesitation, no questions, a clean job. And yet, for the first time in his life, Marcus couldn't silence the voice screaming inside him. Why her? Why this woman? Why this child? The client who had hired him was Veronica, a woman as beautiful as she was merciless. Marcus had met her in a private suite high above the city, her perfume sweet, but her words venomous. She was the type who wore diamonds like armor and smiled with her lips, while her eyes gleamed with calculation. Her voice had dripped with casual cruelty as she laid out her demand. Eliza had to disappear permanently, not because Eliza had wronged her, not because of some great betrayal, but because she existed. Because she carried within her the one thing that stood in the way of Veronica's ambition, Daniel's child. Veronica wanted Daniel's empire, his fortune, his name. But as long as Eliza and her unborn baby remained, Daniel's heart would never be fully hers. And Veronica wasn't a woman who tolerated obstacles. She leaned across the polished mahogany table when she first met Marcus, her manicured fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass. "I don't care how you do it," she had said, her tone dripping with icy finality. "But it has to be clean, quiet. She cannot be allowed to have that child. Do this, and you'll never have to worry about money again." Marcus had nodded then, outwardly calm, inwardly untouched. Jobs were jobs. Money was money. But now, back in that motel room, staring at Eliza's photograph, he felt the first crack appear in the stone wall of his soul. The following morning, Marcus followed Eliza for the first time. His car idled across the street from a small suburban grocery store, its windows fogging slightly from the rain. He watched as she stepped out of her modest sedan, struggling a little with the effort of carrying her belly. She wore a simple dress, her hair pulled back into a loose braid, her steps slow but steady. She moved with the grace of someone who carried not just herself, but a fragile life within her. Inside the store, Marcus trailed her from a distance, his hat pulled low, his coat collar raised. He watched her pause in the baby aisle, her fingers tracing the tiny bottles, the soft pastel blankets, the impossibly small socks. She picked up a package of pacifiers, smiled faintly to herself, and placed it gently into her cart. Then she rested her hand on her stomach, her lips moving ever so slightly as if whispering a secret to her unborn child. And just like that, Marcus's chest tightened with something he hadn't felt in years. He couldn't look away. He thought of his own past, long buried, long ignored, of the life he had destroyed when he chose the path of blood. He thought of the people he had silenced, the families he had shattered. For the first time, he wondered what stories those people might have carried, what children they might have been raising, what love they might have left behind. Eliza finished her shopping and walked toward the register. Marcus's instincts told him it would be easy, so easy, to end it here. A slip of poison in the parking lot, a staged accident, a moment of distraction turned deadly. He had done it before, countless times. But his hands refused to move. Instead, he found himself studying her face, the quiet strength in her eyes, the way she smiled at the cashier as though even the smallest human interaction mattered. When she left the store, he followed her again, watching as she drove home to a modest two-story house with flower pots lining the porch. She carried her groceries inside slowly, carefully, pausing every so often to steady herself. Through the window, Marcus saw her unpacking baby items with tender care, folding tiny clothes into neat piles. She sat in a rocking chair by the window and held up a soft blanket, brushing it against her cheek before draping it across the crib. Then she rested her hands on her belly again and closed her eyes, humming softly to a song only she and her baby could hear. Marcus's chest ached. He didn't know why. He only knew that in all his years, in all the chaos and blood and ruin, he had never seen anything so sacred. This wasn't just a woman. This wasn't just a target. This was life itself. And for the first time in his long, brutal career, Marcus felt fear, not of death, not of failure, but of himself. Because he knew that if he obeyed Veronica, if he silenced Eliza, he would kill not just a woman and her unborn child, but the last fragile piece of humanity left in his soul. And as the storm rolled across the night sky, Marcus whispered to himself a vow he didn't yet understand. He would not let this woman die. Not her child, not while he still had breath in his body. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment Marcus's resolve shifted further from the man he used to be. What began as a job had grown into an invisible tether binding him to Eliza and the unborn child she carried. He told himself he was merely gathering information, waiting for the right moment to strike, but deep inside he knew the truth. He couldn't do it. Every time he saw her face, every time he heard her soft humming drift from the open window of her home, the thought of harming her felt like betraying something sacred. Marcus watched her from a distance, sometimes parked across the street, sometimes leaning in the shadows of the garden fence. He memorized her routines, not to plan her death, but to ensure her safety. He noticed the way she walked to the mailbox each morning, pausing halfway to catch her breath, her hand protectively resting on her belly. He saw how she spent afternoons preparing a nursery, painting the walls a soft shade of yellow, hanging tiny stars from the ceiling, folding baby clothes into drawers with meticulous care. Her life was so small, so ordinary, and yet, to Marcus, it had become more precious than anything he had ever known. But shadows of danger loomed ever closer. Veronica's calls grew sharper, her patience thinner. She wanted results. Her voice on the phone dripped venom. She should have been gone by now. What are you waiting for? Do you need me to find someone else? Each word was like a knife pressing against Marcus's conscience. He had never failed an assignment before. His reputation had been built on efficiency, on silence, on never letting his emotions dictate his work. Yet here he was, lying to his client, inventing excuses to buy time. It has to be clean, he would mutter, his voice steady though his heart was in turmoil. Rushing it risks exposure. Veronica didn't care about risks. She cared only about erasing Eliza and clearing the path to Daniel's wealth and devotion. In her mind, the pregnant woman was nothing more than a fragile obstacle, one she was paying Marcus handsomely to remove. But Marcus knew that once Veronica's patience snapped, she would find another assassin, one without the burden of conscience, one who wouldn't hesitate. And that thought filled him with dread. If he didn't act soon, if he didn't make a choice, Eliza's life would still be lost. The breaking point came one quiet evening. Eliza had just returned from a doctor's appointment. Marcus followed her car at a discreet distance, his hands tightening on the steering wheel as he watched her pull into her driveway. She moved slowly, her body heavy with pregnancy, exhaustion etched on her face. He parked a block away, ready to slip back into the shadows, when he saw something that froze his blood, a black sedan lingering at the end of the street. Its headlights dimmed, its windows tinted. It didn't belong. Marcus's instincts screamed danger. He knew the look of a predator lying in wait. It was the same role he had played countless times. Without hesitation, he stepped out of his car and approached the sedan with calculated calm. But before he reached it, the vehicle roared to life and sped away, vanishing into the night. Marcus stood there for a moment, his pulse hammering, realization striking hard. Veronica was getting restless. She was testing him, perhaps even sending backup to ensure the job got done. That night, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He could no longer pretend to be a silent observer. He had to reveal himself. He approached Eliza's door, his footsteps heavy with the weight of what he was about to do. When she opened it, her eyes widened in surprise. She had seen him once before, At the grocery store, a stranger she thought was just another passerby. Now he stood before her, broad-shouldered, his face shadowed, his presence both intimidating and strangely protective. He introduced himself with a lie, claiming to be a security consultant who had intercepted threats against her. At first, she laughed, shaking her head, unable to believe that anyone would want to harm her. But when Marcus produced a recording he had secretly made of Veronica's call, her smile crumbled. The words cut through her like glass. Veronica's voice, cold and merciless, discussing her death as casually as one might order dinner. Eliza's knees weakened, her hand clutching the edge of the doorframe as tears welled in her eyes. She struggled to understand. Why would anyone want me dead? She whispered, her voice breaking. And then Marcus told her the truth. About Veronica, about Daniel's betrayal, about the plot that had been unfolding behind her back. Eliza's world shattered in an instant. The man she loved, the father of her child, had betrayed her with another woman, a woman willing to kill to take her place. She pressed her hand to her belly, sobbing not just for herself, but for the innocent life inside her. She felt abandoned, broken, stripped of the safety she had always believed surrounded her. But through the haze of grief, she felt Marcus's presence beside her, steady and unyielding. He didn't touch her, he didn't dare. But his voice was a lifeline. He told her she was not alone, that he would protect her, that no harm would reach her or her child. He didn't know why he was saying it, didn't know why the words felt so heavy with truth. But in that moment, Eliza believed him. Something in his eyes, dark though they were, carried a sincerity that Daniel's never had. From that night on, Marcus became her shadow, not as an assassin but as a guardian. He stood watch outside her home, followed her to appointments, made sure no strange car lingered too long on her street. He began to notice the little things, the way she sang softly to her unborn baby while preparing dinner, the way she smiled faintly at children passing by, the way she sat by the window late at night, staring at the stars as though searching for strength. And as he watched, something stirred inside Marcus that terrified him more than any gunfight ever had. He was falling in love. Not the fiery love of lust or possession, but a deeper, purer love, the love of a man who wanted nothing more than to shield another soul from pain. He knew he could never have her. She was a wife, a mother, to be, a woman too good for the shadows he carried. But that didn't matter. For the first time in his life, Marcus had found something worth living for, something worth protecting, even if it meant sacrificing himself. Meanwhile, Veronica's fury only grew. She called him again, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You're stalling. Do you take me for a fool? If I don't hear from you soon, I'll find someone else. And trust me, they won't hesitate the way you have." Marcus's jaw clenched as he listened. He knew she meant it. And that meant Eliza's life hung by a thread, more fragile than ever. But instead of fear, he felt clarity. He was done being a weapon in the hands of monsters. He would not let Eliza be destroyed by someone else's greed. If Veronica wanted war, then Marcus would give her one. And so, as the rain returned, drumming hard against the earth, Marcus prepared for a confrontation that would test not just his skill, but his soul. He was no longer an assassin. He was something else now. Something he had never dared to believe he could be. A protector. A man who had found redemption in the very life he was hired to take.